part of Teaching What Matters homeschool group. Today, we're going to be learning about reptiles. What kind of tortoise is this?
These are African spur-thighed tortoises, also known as sulcata tortoises. They are the third largest tortoise in the world.
Really?
Yes, they will grow to be about 100 pounds and almost 2 feet across. They are really, really big animals, and they are a huge responsibility. And unfortunately, a lot of people get these as really cute little babies that they're about this big when they're born. But when they're an adult, they're the size of this box. They're also a very destructive species. They dig a lot. So Hamilton here is an example of what happens when you don't raise an animal the way that it needs to be. Hamilton has what's called pyramiding. It comes from not having enough light, not having the right foods, the right everything, the right lighting, the right foods, the right supplementation. Hamilton ended up with a deficiency on his scoots, which creates this little kind of boxy thing. Now, after he got with us, his boxiness has kind of started to smooth out. This is Lafayette. Lafayette is the same type of tortoise, but as you can see, Lafayette has a pretty smooth shell that doesn't have these boxes all over it.
It's not very raised.
Yeah. So Lafayette has been with me a very long time compared to Hamilton just came from somebody that got overwhelmed. It wasn't a bad home. It just, they didn't know what they were doing. And the minute they noticed they didn't know what they were doing, they called me.
They wanted to make sure that they were doing what was best for the turtle.
And that's the important thing. These tortoises need tons of land and tons of grass and tons of food. They literally will eat a field of grass in a day. They will chow down on it. And there's a joke that goes around that instead of having goats, you can have tortoises and they'll do the same thing. These guys, they get so big and they can be very dangerous as adults. These two things right here turn into very sharp, like mandibles almost. They're like these spikes, and they use them to fight when they're grown up as males. These guys are also not sexually mature until they're about 10.
How do you tell if it's a boy or...
So until sulcata tortoises are about a foot across, about maybe 10, 12 inches across, you cannot tell. But we know for a fact Hamilton's a boy because Hamilton actually showed us he was a boy. But I will show you, he's going to get a little... If you look at the bottom of Hamilton's shell, you see how that is an outside, like it points to the outside. That's how a boy looks.
So you said like they eat grass and stuff.
Tons of grass. These are a grassland tortoise. They live mostly off of grass, very little fruits, very little vegetables. They will eat greens, collard greens, dandelions. Sometimes we give them romaine lettuce, like when we're bringing them to show them to kids and teach kids about them. We'll let them eat some romaine. But most of their food is grass off the yard, off of our lawn. And we're constantly seeding their enclosures to make sure that they've got enough grass to eat. And if they don't have enough grass, we get them hay. We get them a lot of hay, just like a horse. We get them hay. And when you're talking about horses, these guys smell and poop like a horse.
That's really weird.
It is so weird. It is so weird. This one decided to take a poop in my car on the way here.
What are these?
These are leopard geckos. They are a desert species that eat only insects. And they're nocturnal. They love to be out at night. And if you look at their eyes open and close when it comes to, oh, they're trying to come say hi. Here you go. Just hold them. Just follow where they're going. They love to be curious when they're out. And the cool thing about leopard geckos is that they hold water in their tails.
Is that why their tail is like very plump?
That's how you know that they've had enough water. And that's Omni. Omni is a bell albino gecko. which is a type of color phase for leopard geckos, or a morph, as people like to call it.
I've heard that people they use selective breeding with the geckos.
So selective breeding, what selective breeding is you have two animals with traits that you want to produce. And so what you'll do is you take those two animals and you will have them mate, and they will produce certain percentages of certain traits, whether that be a heterozygous trait, or it be a codominant, or there's all sorts of different types of genes that they can carry, and you're going to breed them based on what gene you want to come forward. Like if you want them to have more spots, you'll breed them that have more spots. If you want them to have more lines, if you want them to be albino, you're going to breed them to have all those traits.
How much do these guys eat? They're fairly small.
So these guys are adults, and they eat about once or twice a week, depending on how much weight they have. But one of the big problems about leopard geckos in captivity is they can get overweight.
So what is this lizard here?
This is Doja. Doja is a 3-year-old green iguana, known as an iguana. They are an herbivore animal that eats only greens. They love to live in the trees. They're arboreal. They have these really cool claws, as you can see, that lets them climb. It also likes to claw my skin, but it helps them climb up. And they've got this really cool dewlap right there that lets you know, hey, I don't want to be around somebody. I like you, I don't like you. But they grow up to be 6 feet long, and they will get the size of a small dog.
So you said they're herbivores.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
Because of their whole setup. They have the spikes, they've got the talons.
They do like they could be really vicious and eat meat. No, green iguanas just need those things so that they can get away from predators, because they are an animal that is definitely eaten. Even humans eat these guys in our home. Also, crickets don't last as long.
No, I'm afraid of mortality, right?
Oh God, they die like as soon as you bring them home.
We got a skink. I'm talking about.
You said go to professional breeders. Are there any
Yes.
near here?
So in East Texas, a bunch of the breeders have moved away. Most of the breeders that I like to go see are the ones at the reptile shows. I like to go to the North American Breeders Conference that's in Arlington. I also like to go to the herps shows, Conroe, all over Houston, Louisiana, Oklahoma. They're all over the place. And sometimes they even come to East Texas at Longview. And then there's Lone Star. Lone Star is also another one. And those breeders are going to know what they're talking about. You're going to be able to ask everybody questions. And one of the things is don't buy from the first person you meet. Always ask questions. You looked at me like that. Why are you looking at me like that? She just went like, Yeah, don't buy from the first person. Don't, ask every single question. And I know people like to go, oh, that's stupid. No, ask any question. Ask every single question you can think about. Because this animal's life, I'm sorry, I scared you. This animal's life depends on you, okay? Making sure she's worn and she's fed and she's got all she needs to make sure she lives a nice, long life. So a good breeder is going to show you the mom and dad. They're going to have some way of showing you mom and dad. They're going to have minimal siblings together. When it comes to bearded dragons, you don't want to see 30, 40 bearded dragons in one container. Because what bearded dragons, when they're babies, they'll eat each other's fingers because they think that they're bugs. Yeah.
Kind of like what happened.
What happened to Oracle? Yeah. So Oracle probably fell asleep where she eats because she's outright. They breed theirs outside and raise them outside. So she probably fell asleep. And when someone's like, hey, snack. Same thing happens with bearded dragons. And so you want somebody who doesn't have every single bearded dragon just shoved into a container. You want to see bearded dragons that are healthy. They're alert. They're attentive. Like you see how I moved my hand over her and she jumped? She knows what's going on. She's alert. Okay. She doesn't look emaciated. Her fat pads, these things right here, her fat pads are nice and full. She's hydrated. Her nails look clean. She doesn't have any poop on her nails. She does need them trimmed. She doesn't.
I noticed she is missing a finger, actually.
Yeah, so that happens with rescue animals. Is you'll end up with, hey, my sibling snacked on me, you know, and it happens. That's why a lot of rescue animals, they'll have little things like that. So you want to make sure they're fed, make sure they're watered, make sure they look plump and they're moving around. Don't go for the one in the back of the cage that's kind of hiding. I know that's kind of cute, especially when it comes to dogs, but when it comes to reptiles, it means something's wrong. If it's really not doing what the other siblings are doing, you don't want it. You don't want to do it.
It'll make you feel bad, probably.
Right, but
Like,
there could be
that was
something
so
wrong. There could be.
There could be like a disease or something. Or
There could be, yeah. There could be something wrong, something genetically. It could be stress. And stress is the number one killer of reptiles. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Next to bad husbandry. Those are the two worst things. So, you want to get a reputable breeder. You want to make sure you ask every single question you can ask. What are you feeding them? What are you not feeding them? What size cage should I have? What lighting should I have? What heating should I have? What humidity should there be? You want to ask them all those questions on what they're doing with their animals. And also cross-reference your answers. Go online before you go to a show and you want to see an animal. Go and ask all the important questions. Then when you go to the show, you'll know what questions to ask. Okay?
And you want them to be like very specific, so there's specific answers.
And you also, since you're buying from a breeder, you want to know their genetics. Know a little bit about. So with this girl, she's what's called hypomelanistic. If you look at her nails, they're clear. That means she's hypo. That means they removed a lot of the black pigments out of her coloring, her natural coloring. She's also what's a translucent, which means her skin's a little thinner than other bearded dragons, which also means her lighting is a little different than my thicker dragons. She's also a leatherback, which means all of her spikes up here have been pulled out. There's another type of, she's watching you. You saw that, right? These spikes right here, there's a genetic strain of bearded dragons called smoothies. And smoothies don't have any stripes whatsoever. Any spikes, nothing. They're just soft. And then there's different color phases. There's all sorts of things. So we're about to shed. That's why we're a little dull. But we're usually really bright.
What are the most common diseases found?
Parasites is the big thing. Parasites is going to be your big thing. You want to keep an eye out for abscesses. Mouth rot is a major problem. It's where they get an infection in their mouth. And I don't want to get bit, so I'm not going to shove my fingers in their mouth. But they'll get an infection in their mouth and it'll hurt so much they can't eat. And they end up dying from that bacteria. Another thing is scale rot. Scale rot comes from a really bad kept enclosure. Let's see, I'm trying, and of course, animals can get cancer just like we can. We have to keep an eye on this little thing on the back of her and have that checked every so often. Now, she's going to shed a big chunk of this off, but there's still a little bump there. And so we have the vet keeping an eye on that. You always want to notice things on your animals. And when in doubt, ask your vet. Like 100%. Yeah. I've never met a vet in the world that'll tell you that's the stupidest question or that's a dumb question. No, ask your vet. That's what they're there for.
You said they like, I know that I've heard they like being solitary. Is that true?
Yes. So bearded dragons, they can be very territorial with each other, especially if they're males. And they have ways they will communicate with each other. Another thing is, if you have two bearded dragons in the enclosure, you don't know if you've got a male or a female, and you could end up with eggs that you weren't prepared for. And you don't want that. Breeding should never be something that's just spur of the moment
like
done.
Accidental.
Yes, you want to make sure that you understand what you're actually doing before you even think about breeding. Just because you have two animals doesn't mean you should go and put them together and breed them. You want to know what you're doing. I really recommend looking at rescue because there's so many of these animals that people aren't prepared to have. She's about to go to sleep. She sees the camera. She's like, what's that? You want to look in rescue because, I mean, there's a lot of animals that people weren't prepared to have. And guess what? They're now in rescue without homes. So she's a rescue. So she came from a really good home, but they realized that she was just not the type of pet they needed.
Mm-hmm.
So they called me and asked me to grab it.
You said you're not supposed to get any of these reptiles at a pet store
Yes.
because of the selective breeding and there might be something wrong.
Yes. A lot of times pet stores get animals from these massive breeding facilities that really don't focus on the quality of the animal, and the animals end up dying pretty quickly. Most of your pet stores, your larger, without naming names, most of your larger pet stores have a huge amount of animals that they either send to rescue or euthanize because it just came in really, really bad, in bad shape. So you wouldn't get your animals there, but you should get your supplies there. But still do your own investigation, your own looking up, because like we were explaining in our talk today, there's a lot of things that are learned constant. We're always learning. Just the things that we knew back in the 90s are now not what we do in husbandry today. There's a lot of differences. But you do want to get your supplies from a reputable store that you know is going to store quality. You don't want something that's not going to be warranted. You don't want something that's going to have questionable supplements in it. You want a reputable brand. You want a reputable quality. One of our bearded dragons was literally found on a back road. So there are rescues that will, but there are great sites that will give you references like petfinder.com.
Mm-hmm.
There is dubia.com. They will actually list rescues that have animals available and send you information about those animals. Now, when you rescue an animal, there is an application process because they're not just going to hand the animal over to somebody who's not prepared.
Especially since it was already in a rescue.
Exactly. You want to know all the answers, all the questions. And then you're going to pay an adoption fee because the way that rescues stay in operation is they charge adoption fees to cover vet fees and feeding fees and all of those things.
How much is the usual adoption fee for it?
So your average adoption fee for rescue reptiles is about $50 is going to be your average.
Okay.
But it can go up depending on the type of animal, depending on the animal's medical bills. If the animal had a lot of parasites or needed a lot of medicine, had a broken limb or something, its adoption fees are going to be higher because the rescue had to pay a lot of money to get that animal adoptable.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And as always, teach matters out.
Traffic jam, those bills are due. Will you remember the innocence of you? Fireworks inside your heart.
She's like, nah, I saw that whisker twitch.